All right, everyone, come on in, settle in. We're going to get started here in just a moment. For those of you who have your Zoom all started and you can hear me, would you please go ahead and put into chat where you're logging in from today? It's always great to know where folks are coming from. We're having gorgeous early fall weather here in Virginia, the kind of weather where you need like the couple of layers to start in the morning, and then it gets hot in the afternoon, and then gets back to kind of a brisk cool in the evenings. It's wonderful. All right, guys, we have Ohio, lots of Virginians. I think I saw a Florida in there, and hello to some of my Lexington colleagues that I also saw pop in. We have a really, Tennessee too. We have a really full hour in front of us. So I wanted to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to welcome you back to this Talks on Tuesday series for this year after our summer break. As you know, for today, we're focusing on supporting families who have toddlers with delayed or atypical social communication development. We're going to support them with strategies that facilitate that shared engagement between the toddler and those who are important in that child's world. I'm thrilled to see so many that you all could make it a priority to attend the session today on an already short week during a very busy part of our year. So let's jump right in. For those of you who I haven't yet had the opportunity to meet, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Lorelei. I'm grateful to serve as a professional development consultant for the Virginia Professional Development Center, which we also call VEIPD. I'm going into my 4th year with VEIPD, but it's my 25th year in the field of early intervention and early childhood special education. I'm also very fortunate to provide developmental services for a couple of families in the local system, serving the Rockbridge and Bath County areas where I live. And social communication has been an area of personal and professional interest and experience for a long time, pretty much as long as I can remember, as I'm the family member of one of the coolest adults I know. He has Down syndrome, and I also have a child with autism. So a big part of my journey. The Division for Early Childhood is a professional organization that guides our work in early intervention. Today's Talks on Tuesday is designed to support early intervention providers' use of many of the recommended practices within these 2 strands. The interaction strand, which is really about assisting caregivers in learning sensitive and responsive ways to interact with the child and promote the child's development. And then the family strand is really being able to engage with the family to build their confidence and competence, that overall capacity in flexible, individualized, and family-centered ways. Seth is going to talk for a moment about accessibility tips within Zoom.
Yeah, so through Zoom, you have several different features that allow this webinar to be as accessible to you as you'd like. We have auto-generated captions. Those are available in the Zoom menu. You can click that CC button there to get a transcript. Keyboard shortcuts can control your entire Zoom meeting. You can check the settings for that, but you do not even need to use your mouse during the entire webinar. And then Zoom also works with screen readers. So if you have one that you normally use, Zoom works with that. If you have any questions about this or any other tech questions during your webinar, you can private message me over the Zoom chat.
Seth is really helpful. Please do reach out if you have any tech questions. I do it all the time. All right, so today this webinar is going to be divided into 2 parts. So in the first part, we're going to build up everyone's understanding and foundation about what exactly is joint attention, how it develops in the infant and toddler years, and why early intervention is critical for delayed or atypical social communication. Then in the second part, we're going to talk about and share some different strategies that EI practitioners can use to help caregivers build their ability to facilitate that development of joint attention with their infant and toddler. So for social, joint attention is one of the areas under this bigger umbrella of social communication and these early social communication skills that we're supporting in early intervention. What I want us to think about is thinking about social communication as the blue toolbox you see here, right? So you've got this big blue toolbox, and all of that is social communication. Within this metaphor, then, each of these tools is an underlying, oh, I'm seeing that people can't hear. Seth, are you seeing that? Is there
Yeah,
anything I
I
can
think
do?
everyone else can hear. I think you're good to go.
Oh, okay.
Katrina might
Okay,
just need to
good.
reset Zoom.
All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. All right. So then each of these components of social communication, the 6 components, are like a kind of tool within that toolbox that children learn to use over the course of their development. So, for example, social interaction is communication that occurs between 2 individuals, right? It's communication, it's social. There's a sender, a receiver, and a back and a forth. And the rules of social interaction that a child learns over time, those are very culturally mediated, right? And things like secure attachment with an attuned, responsive caregiver, the ability to understand emotions, and self-regulation during an interaction so you can attend to the message, are all components of early developmental social interactions. That's a big component of social communication. Pragmatics is to understand the rules that govern language, things like prosody, tone, all of that kind of falls under pragmatics. Verbal communication and nonverbal communication, right, is verbal communication. That's the speech acts that we're using to convey a message and understand a message. Nonverbal, this is using gestures, signs, other forms, picture exchange, other forms of communication to be able, again, to send, receive, and understand, and to effectively communicate. Language processing is our ability to take in a message, understand it, figure out a response, and plan that response back out. Those are 5 of all very important tools within social communication. The one that we're going to hone more in on today and get really specific is the component of social understanding. That's where joint attention falls under. To communicate effectively, one must learn more than just the meaning of words or gestures or signals that the communication partner is using or sending. You also need to be able to learn the social rules around and involved in communication. These are often very subtle and can vary really widely depending on the context, right? Can depend on power relationships, on gender cues within a culture, so many different things. Social understanding requires that we recognize things that give us the signals about these social rules, things like facial expression, tone of voice, our body language, how close we are to other people, understanding the perspectives of others. So we've got to be able to read cues and like facial expressions, but we also have to be able to understand that that person has a perspective that might be different from ours. And we also have to be able to adapt our own communication to fit the environment. So think of what the rule is and then code switch or do what we need to do to fit that situation. So that's all social understanding. And then embedded within that are these principles, including joint attention. We're not going to talk about theory of mind today. That's a whole nother big topic, but it is related to the ability to be able to perceive that somebody else's mental state might be different than mine and what that feeling or thought is. Executive function is all of this planning and working memory and all that up here in frontal brain kind of stuff. And this is just the conscious and unconscious memory that goes into being able to think about what the social rules are and how to be able to understand them and apply them in a communication act. So joint attention then, right? So there's all these little tools that lead us down to this one little one of joint attention. If you want to look at kind of overall social communication skills, everything within that toolbox, within that blue toolbox, this is a really great handout. Seth's going to put it in chat for you. It is from the American Speech Language Hearing Association. We often just refer to as ASHA. And so these are social communication benchmarks that go up to 36 months and I believe beyond, but definitely serve our purpose for early intervention. So it really helps you look at all of that. And again, in a lot of the inventories we're using, like the help strands, these are embedded within there, but it's also sometimes nice just to have a consolidated place of benchmarks for social communication. All right, next we're going to take a look at an interaction between a little one and her father. And what I'd like for us to do is be able to look for those early social communication skills. So look for what you, tell us what you notice here after you see this in chat. Let us know what you're seeing around those early joint attention skills. And then we're going to talk more about them. So social communication skills, what do you notice that you think falls under this? And let's see what we find.
Hey. Hey. اليوم شفتي منو شفتي اليوم؟ شفتي كل يوم منو شفتي؟ ها؟ هاي البانكيك؟ هاي بانكيك هاي. ها؟ أقول. ها؟ شنو؟ قولي شنو يعني؟ ها؟ قولي لي. أقول. هاي الكوة الحلوة. هاي الحلوة الحلوة الحلوة. نعوسي. نحساني. نامي وقت نوم.
I don't know about you, but I really needed that like dose of all those good chemicals that just come up when I get to see a beautiful baby and a wonderful interaction like that one. So that is actually Corey Hill's grandbaby and son-in-law there. And we don't need to know what actually the dad is saying, do we? To understand what the father's doing in the ways that his behaviors are supporting this infant in social communication and that early joint attention. So so some of the things that you all are noting here, right? You're noticing the eye contact, right? You're noticing how that baby right there in those arms, he's primed to look at that, at the father's face, right? And he's really looking and observing. He's so interested in that, you know, interested in the father's face. And dad is attuned right there with the baby, right? Then when Ezzy's gaze, the baby's name is Ezzy, when Ezzy's gaze shifts and starts looking up and over to the side, what does dad do, right? Dad shares his attention. Dad shares that shift, follows his gaze, as you just said there, Melissa, right? Follows the gaze to then attend to and adds language, right? So adds language to these shared things that they're both attending to, right? And so just the way that that interaction, that back and forth, and the way that the father supports the baby in this shared interaction really is exactly what we want to be seeing in that early development of social communication and of and within that, with that joint attention, that shared interaction right there. And yeah, I also love how you all notice touch, right? So the father was using touch to keep the infant kind of attuned and into that interaction together and regulate it. That regulation component was definitely there within that social interaction. We talked about this too. I just forgot. I got so excited. I forgot my second bullet was there. All right. So now that we looked, we got a, you know, in our minds right there, a good idea of what that early supported joint engagement looks like. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the components of joint engagement to kind of further build our understanding of how complex this skill is, and then where our entry points might be when we're working with toddlers in particular who have some delayed or atypical development in this area. So joint attention is composed of two parts, really. So there's the ability to it's called responding joint attention. You'll often see it in the literature research, shortened as RJA. So joint attention overall is simply put, it's when two people are paying attention to the same thing together. So if you and I are both looking at this pen right now together and talking about this pen, we're engaging in that shared attention over the same thing. And we're gazing at it, we're attending back to each other to communicate, we're able to shift between the object and each other. And what that allows us to do, right, is to be able to learn and to share and to communicate all together over the same thing. If we can't, that's really a lot of the basis of learning in school as well, right? And it's definitely the basis of learning language. And within that, the ability to do that, you first start by being able to having responding joint attention. So that's the ability to follow another person's gaze or pointing gesture to look at what they're looking at. Little Ezzy wasn't quite there yet, right? Dad was supporting Ezzy and engaging in kind of the shared attention, but Ezzy wasn't trying to direct Dad's gaze, and he wasn't following Dad's point. Dad was following Ezzy and supporting him in that interaction. So you can see how it slowly starts with adults and that attunement, that face-to-face attunement, and it develops into because the child learns to focus in on the parent's face and their eye gaze and their gestures, they begin over time to learn to be able to respond to what the caregiver or sibling, somebody important in their environment, is pointing out, so that they too can share in that. And then a little bit later, they learn to initiate joint attention themselves, right? So this is when they're actively and intentionally directing another person's attention to something that is interesting to them. So they can do this through gestures, vocalizations, eye movements early on, any of those ways, but they're intentionally saying, hey, look at this. I think this is interesting. I want you to check it out with me too. So as I said, for this one, initiating joint attention develops a little later than responding joint attention is built on top of that. That's something important to look at with interaction two, or with intervention two, is just really wanting to make sure that we're looking for both components of joint attention and seeing where our entry point might be. Initiating joint attention is a more complex skill because you have to be able to share your own interest and then bring another person, be able to bring somebody effectively into that interest. What's really important too in remembering is that this skill in particular, initiating joint attention, is very closely correlated to language development outcomes in young children, particularly children who are later diagnosed with autism. And it's an area that we can definitely make headway into, but it's something we really want to support because it is predictive or associated with later outcomes. The development of joint attention, that responding joint attention and the initiating joint attention, sets on a child's ability to jointly engage, so spend time together with another person and learn to sustain that interaction and engagement over time. And it also, for initiating joint attention, it means that they've got to learn some kind of gesture or way of getting another person to follow their interest and share in it with them, right? So we've got these joint engagement behaviors along with these joint attention gestures that children learn to do, and that we're helping parents be able to facilitate when these aren't developing as expected. So as you might expect, joint engagement starts with unengagement, right? So the infant is really kind of visually exploring, or other ways that the early infant might explore. But it's really that the adult is there kind of helping them share kind of in the moment. Person-centered engagement happens before object-centered engagement. And again, that's also another really important thing to think about for when we're looking at intervention. We know that children who are later diagnosed with autism often spend more time in object engaged actions and activities. We also, though, want to make sure that we're looking for and helping build those person engaged joint attention opportunities as well. This is really, the person engaged is really when the infant is able to shift between their caregiver's face and their immediate environment. So that's some of what Dad was supporting Ezzy in that video, right? So when Ezzy looks up and away, Dad is there with him, talking with him, patting him, and kind of bringing him back to, when he comes back to that face-to-face, helping him learn very early to be able to shift from, I'm here with Dad, to I'm looking up here, and then I can follow that back to Dad. That's later then going to be applied when they're playing games or they're playing toys, to be able to shift to the toy and then back to Dad, to shift to the toy and then back to Dad. But it starts first with that early person engaged interaction. Things like peekaboo, pat a cake are kinds of people games that children learn at an early age, and really does have that that joint attention with turn taking back and forth that we like to see. And then object engagement. So this begins though with the infant just exploring those toys, reaching out and grabbing a toy that's of interest, and the adult kind of starts coming in with supported engagement after that, of being able to kind of come into that toy play a little bit, talk with the infant about the toy. Oh, that you have a ball, right? They add language to it. We're going to talk about the intervention part of it later, but first the child is interested in that object, and then the adult comes in and supports the child in that joint engagement over the object, right? Or the joint engagement initially with, that supporting them in that play, the back and forth. And the supported joint attention with the adult gives way to the child becoming increasingly more competent at being able to coordinate their own, and even the adults' attention back and forth between themselves, the game, or the object that they're interested in. And notice I'm not just saying toy, right? Because it doesn't just have to be a toy. It can be any object that is not a person immediately within the interaction that requires shifting and shifting back in a shared and coordinated manner. And not just being able to coordinate that joint engagement, but also being able to sustain it, so that you're getting several turns in together, and children should really be growing in both of those skills up. And those are just really starting to kind of take hook around 24 to 36 months, that they're getting more adept at both of those parts. And then that just continues to grow, particularly in terms of like symbolic play during the preschool years. This also includes intentional gestures, like shaking their head, right? They learn that about about 9 months, we start to see it. And then also the point, right? How a child is showing us that to look at something. In just a moment, we're going to look at an interaction, but first I just wanted to talk with you about is requesting with a point or another similar gesture the same as joint attention? In the chat, maybe yes, no, just give you a moment to think about that one. Kim says no. You all are on it. I'm seeing a lot of no's, and here's why. The form of the communicative act might be the same, right? So a point is a point, and it's a form of communication. It's directing attention to something, right? That's the form of the communication act. But the function is different. So if a child needs something or wants something, is requesting something, that's the function of that communicative point, right? So the child is coming, they're pointing, they might be taking a hand, but that point, they're trying to tell the adult, hey, I want those crackers, right? I want those goldfish, or I want my cup. So it's a need-based, it's a request, and that function is different. When a child is using a point for joint attention, what we want them to be able to do is to bring the adult's attention to something that they want to share in together, and that there's going to be back and forth coordinated attention over. So they want to share, they want to show us that there's an airplane in the sky. They want to show us the train going by. They want to show us that the ball just rolled across the floor. So there's something that they want to do together and to share. And there's an ongoing engagement over. And so that's what we're looking for here, is not just when we're asking questions like, and when we're looking for, can the child point? Yeah, but what is that conveying, right? Do they have the function of engagement and joint attention, that initiating joint attention function, or are they requesting? Are they just using it to request? Because if they're just using it to request, and then we as attentive and responsive caregivers might come in and turn that into a responsive interaction, right? But then it's more, we've supported them in an interaction over joint attention on it. They haven't initiated for the purpose of showing and kind of sharing their worlds with us. And that's something we want to be able to identify and help families understand why that's so important if they don't, already see that as a priority. Another question before we look at a little bit of video is, why is early intervention for joint attention important? Oh, sorry, I skipped a slide. What could cause a delay in the development of joint attention? So what are some reasons, what are some things that could cause a delay in joint attention or atypical development? So I see visual disabilities, autism, no adult attention, that interaction component, neglect, medical fragility, attention, hearing. So we're seeing sensory disabilities, screen time, trauma, sensory regulation. Yeah, you guys are hitting a lot of these big things, right? So really anything that can impact that early attunement and responsivity of the child and the caregiver. So anything that impacts what you saw with Ezzy and his dad, that back and forth, that the child and the child's ability to really be able to explore up close those faces of caregivers and receive that supported engagement in that back and forth, having their cues interpreted as communicative acts and really being able to feel this back and forth and to feel the responsivity of that. Things like neglect and trauma can absolutely impact that early attachment and attunement. Things like also, I think I saw the appear of like early medical issues. So a baby who's been in the NICU for long periods of time and the caregiver really kind of helping them get an attuned interaction, because a lot of times their self-regulation is really limited. And they're really having to it's hard for them to organize themselves into accepting that kind of back and forth. We've also seen some people talk about sensory disabilities like vision and hearing, and how those can, the ways the child might be exploring and interacting with the world might be different than the caregiver. And the caregiver might not notice early on too that there might be a visual or a hearing disability coming into play. But then also things that you guys mentioned, absolutely, like other causes of social communication disorder, like perhaps something that could be an early indicator of autism, things like other genetic conditions like Down syndrome, things that are associated with intellectual disability can absolutely cause early joint attention and language and communication delays, and the need for us to kind of come in and be supportive, right? So you guys are on it. Now in chat, why is intervention early? Why does it matter? Why do we have to intervene early? Any ideas there? Again, helps the learning. Yeah, so that connection I'm seeing here between joint attention and learning, right? So particularly if you think of like some of our learning theorists like Vygotsky, think of that social learning connection and how social learning really is, particularly in that home situation where children really need to be able to tune in and be able to observe and learn and engage in those interactions with sensitive caregivers and siblings to really know, what are the social rules around language? How is it that I communicate successfully? All of that happens within the context of joint attention. And all of that happens really early. And if there's any sort of breakdown in that development, we really want to be able to take advantage of the neuroplasticity that is inherent in early development, right? So if we can get in early, while there's still that neuroplasticity, when the brain really can kind of change its connections and adapt more, we're going to be that intervention is going to take less time, and we're going to be able to help the parents and caregivers be able to help children make some of these shifts in the ways that they're engaging with people and in the ways that they're engaging with their environment. Some of you guys got into this too. Early intentional social communication gestures support the development of spoken language or of other language systems. And so it's really critical, right? So these are foundational skills. And if we don't focus on them, then we're going to be kind of missing out on helping children get to some of the later stages without some of these kind of holes that can come in. And then also joint attention along these same lines is the most important predictor of language outcomes and for children later identified with autism. So it's really important that if we can get in there during these early stages when the brain is more adaptable, then we can help children build these targets that are then associated with improved language outcomes. All right, so let's get into part 2. We've built a foundation. Let's go in and talk about some things that we can use, tools we can use to help families be able to build their child's capacity to engage in more developed, sustained, coordinated joint engagement. We're going to talk about 4 different areas of intervention that are interconnected. We're going to start with one I just call the ground rules. These are the things you see over and over again in the literature and the research across program methods. These are like kind of the foundational things that just underlie every single strategy or technique that I've seen so far in terms of how to support joint engagement in toddlers. So ground rules, what are they? It's these 3 things. Getting face-to-face, and that is important because that allows the child, without like a vision delay or vision impairment, we would want to make sure we had supports in place there. But typically it would involve the child being able to be able to see our face and us being able to see the child's face, because we're this early eye gaze that we're supporting and following, right? So we want to be able to notice those shifts in a child's eye gaze. Why it was so nice that Dad had Ezzy right there and could really see they were face to face. He could see where Ezzy's attention was going. We'll see this oftentimes when caregivers, will sit in a chair across from a child's height chair when they're the child's having a meal, the child's eating. So you can actually see your face to face. Sometimes I'll see parents or caregivers get on the baby or infant is in on having tummy time is on their belly and kind of holding up. The parent will also get on their belly, look at the child's face and to see what they might be trying to reach at and engage with in front of them. So just really making sure that we're getting down, we're kneeling down, we're doing the things it takes. If we're trying to get a child to follow our gaze or our point or our interest, we're getting down. But most essentially early on that we're down because we're trying to see what they're interested in, and we're going to start trying to build on that. To respond, right? So we're really trying to help parents be able to see those early opportunities the child is giving for joint engagement and helping them learn to respond, to build in that response. And so then the child can take a turn, the parent can take a turn, but really just that early responsiveness and helps the child build that intentionality, understanding that when they're vocalizing over something or they're shifting their eyes to something, that somebody else who's attuned with them is reading that, responding to it, and it builds in that understanding of social interaction. And then following the child's lead. We're going to talk a lot more about what this looks like. when we really operationalize following the child's lead. I think that it sounds easier than it is, and it sounds more intuitive than it is. So we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that. So those are what I consider the ground rules. Get face-to-face, follow the child's lead. Now we're going to watch a video. And you're going to see here a mom interacting with a child. Actually, Corey can weigh in here. Corey, is this a mom and a cousin or a mom? This is not her daughter, is it? I'm not sure if Corey's still there. Mom and niece, that's what I thought. Okay, so it's a mom and niece, and they're engaging in joint engagement here with this toy. So let's take a look. See what ground rules you see in the video.
Minnie. That's Minnie. She has a bow like you. Look. See her bow? Nana, look. Look at my bow. Yeah, Minnie and I both have a bow. There goes Lucy. Where'd she go?
All right. You see the face-to-face, right? She's down there. She's really able to see what the little one is looking at there, right? And she follows the child's lead. The cat comes in, she notices that she shifts, and she's able to follow the child's lead instead of continuing to talk about the car or the bows, what they were talking about before, right? She shifts and follows the child's lead. Absolutely, she's down there and she's pairing. I see a lot of pairing gestures with words, right? Yeah, she's adding that language in, adding those words in to help the child begin to associate words with the important things in their environment. And she responds. Did you notice the way she responds with language, and she responds in other ways, right? She makes associations between the bows. Do you see even she nicely facilitated the little one's ability to attend to her bow. She followed that attention there to that too. So I saw some nice shifts back and forth between the toy and the interactions between the two of them. They shifted to bows, they shifted to the cat, and then they were able to come back. So there's a lot of really nice joint engagement over multiple things, right, within that small interaction. But you could see a lot of the things that the adult was doing in that situation, right, to help that little one be successful in that joint engagement. So that's that supported joint engagement that we're really looking at during the infant months. Yeah, you guys are on it. So with our ground rules, there's another way of thinking about the ground rules and kind of adding a little bit more to those is thinking of serve and return. And many of you all mentioned when we talked about what might cause a delayed or atypical development of joint attention. You guys talked about things that could impact attachment and attunement. And there's a really great resource. Seth is going to pop this in to the chat as well. It is from the Center on the Developing Child from Harvard, which I think many of you, if not all of you guys, know well. This is a resource that has a video and a handout and the handout comes in many different languages. And it talks about 5 steps for serve and return. Again, these embed what I call the ground rules. This is a really great resource. One of the things I wanted to do in this intervention section was be able to connect you to resources that you could either share with colleagues or share with families. And this is a really tremendous one on sharing with families. The video is excellent. We're not going to have time for it today, but it is definitely, we'll put it with the, when we post the video, we'll also post these links, but you also have the handout right there that you can look at. So it has these 5 steps for serve and return, which starts with that. You've got to get face to face so you can notice what the child is into, right? Then that gives you that ability to respond, which is returning that serve. So you're looking to see something that the child maybe intentionally or unintentionally does that you can interpret as a serve. That back and forth is what you're trying to get, so that the child gives or you interpret it as a give. and you respond. So you've hit your first 2 ground rules there. And then you've got these next steps. This resource, and then you'll see other ones too later on, the giving it a name. So that's adding that language in this, because this is a central part to this kind of joint engagement play that you're doing with children, whether it's serve and return or you're playing peekaboo, right? So we add in this language, and we're going to respond to what the child's doing with words or with whatever form of communication we're using with that child. And we're going to encourage that child to take their next turn, to return it, and then to serve, and then return it. And we're going to try to keep that going. One of the harder things to do, right, is to help families think about and use wait time and kind of those everyday interactions. How much wait time is something we as interventionists can really help families be able to do by observing and then reflecting with families on these kinds of interactions, and how much time does that child seem to need. And another one of the things that I think they do really well in this video, if you all check out the video, is they really explain how to help follow the child's lead by, they call it practicing endings and beginnings, but it's really noticing when the child's attention has shifted and being able to follow that shift by closing what you were talking about before and moving on to the next one. So rather than trying to hold the child in the sustained attention over what they were in before, having it be okay to close that and go to the next. And the child picks up a different toy. All right, close it and go to the next. So really helping that child be able to, the point here is to be able to share to keep your interaction going, and to keep that back and forth between you and the child going, the child showing you, the child responding to something you're showing them over an item or an object, rather than attending to one item for a long period of time. So helping parents be able to make that shift. So here's the video I talked about. We're not going to watch it right now, but again, it will be, you'll have it in the links, and I think it is a really great one. It's about, I think it's about 7 or 8 minutes long. So we've talked about kind of our ground rules that underlie kind of all intervention. We've talked about a really great resource with 5 tips that I think parents can really sink into when it comes to being able to build that serve and return, that the turn taking that that is part of joint attention. Now we're going to talk about playing with people and playing with objects next, and some ways to kind of help families be able to facilitate and facilitate more coordinated and more sustained interactions around these 2 different types of play to build up their child's joint attention. And again, we're going to use 2 different resources to show you to those. So person engaged joint attention often develops first, with object engagement following suit. We talked about that when we were talking about the development of joint engagement. We've talked about how some children might have a preference though for one kind of play over another. And that's perfectly fine. We just want to make sure that we can, that we're able to support children doing both, because both are really important. And so we're going to help children in this part. We're going to be thinking about how we can help them develop those shared person-centered interactions as a foundation that can then be built on for object-focused joint attention, where they have to be able to shift between the object and the person, the object and the person. So play with people. These are interactions or games, right? Things like peekaboo, things like some of those kind of little games that happen over and over again in the lives of babies and toddlers and their caregivers. These interactions or games use natural learning opportunities, right? So you have the person, you have the child, and you have a moment for interaction, and that is your natural learning opportunity. Nothing else required. And it's a great ground floor for not just that joint engagement together, but for things like turn taking and imitation. These support children's need for structure and predictability. Often we're going to see a little bit more on it too, but you want to start these games the same way. You're going to end them the same way. You play them the same way. And you do it over and over and over again. And children really like that structure and predictability that can come into this kind of play. If they know what's going to happen, it's a lot easier to regulate and stay in that interaction, sustain it for longer. We also want to make sure that when we're helping families think of these kinds of interactions and games that they can sustain the child's attention, that they're meeting the child's sensory needs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. That we really want people games to be customized to each family's way of interacting. There's not just one game that does this best, right? It's really about what families are able to be playful in together, things that they're going to enjoy together, because both the child and the adult have to love it. This can also be something that's done with siblings too, but both people in it have to be having fun and enjoying it to really keep it going. Sorry, my mouse. So, in Play with People games, what we're going to do is help families understand the child's sensory preferences and incorporate those into the games. We talked earlier about in the different kinds of ways of social communication, how important self-regulation is. Children are often also seeking out ways to maintain their sense. We all are, right? Ways to maintain our sensory preferences. Some children might spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin and spin the same object over because they really, sensory-wise, that visual spinning really is something that they seek out and is a preference for them. Other children might like to swing. Some children might be on the go because they really like that. It's that vestibular up and down, right? That really helps their system stay regulated. Some children might be constantly on the move. Right? So different ways that a child is showing us what their preferences are, and then we're helping families observe that, notice that, and then play games around that. And we're going to explain to families how incorporating these sensory preferences in these games and these interactions supports that social communication development, right? So if they're regulated and they're enjoying it and they're getting what they would seek, or they're not getting things that keep them out of it, right? Both of those in sensory, then we're able to help keep children engaged longer. This is from this resource, this video on games to help your child with autism communicate. And I think it's just a really great thing to have in your pocket. So really being able to look at the child's sensory preference and think about what do they enjoy doing with their bodies and how do they get these different, and then what are some ways that we can look at, what are some different games we can build in off of those to then help the child be able to jointly engage, get some turn taking in, and again, maybe get some imitating in as well. We're going to watch a quick video. I think we have the time to watch this one a few moments. Yeah, so let's watch this quickly. They're going to tell us these tips for people games. So let's take a look at the resource so you get a little snippet of it, and then we'll look at one more resource before we close out.
Tip number 1, give the game a name. Use the name of the game once you've decided on it repeatedly throughout the time that you're playing. And if your child's starting to talk, he may even eventually start to say the name of the game. Tip number 2, play the game the same way each time. When you repeat the same actions and words, this adds structure and predictability to the game, and it helps your child learn what will come next, and maybe even what he could say or do in the game. Tip number 3, play the game several times. Don't be afraid to play the game over and over if your child likes it. The more he plays the game, the more familiar he'll become with it. Tip number 4, give your child a chance to participate in his own way. Once your child's familiar with the game, create opportunities for him to do or say something to keep the game going. For example, if you're swinging him in the blanket, pause every once in a while and see if he'll say something to keep the game going, or maybe do something like give you the corner of the blanket. Tip number 5, help your child send a message. If you pause during the game and your child doesn't give you a cue to keep the game going, like saying something or doing something, you can help him out by giving him a hint. For example, you could model the word go. You could point or gesture to the blanket, or you could even physically help him hand you part of the blanket to keep the game going. Tip number 6, end the game the same way each time. When your child walks away or indicates that he no longer wants to play the game, you can say or do something to mark the end of that game. You could, for example, say all done, sign, or
I'm going to stop it there just for the sake of making sure that we have time to look at the next intervention strategy. While I'm moving on to that, what are some other people games that you've coached families to use in a natural learning environment context for joint attention? If you wouldn't mind sharing those in chat, we are going to collect the chat at the end, and I'll be able to sort of see and look at some of these and perhaps use them in a later blog to give you guys some more ideas too. Oh, hide behind the couch, the game, parachute with balls. You guys keep these coming, and we really will share and use them. So please do keep them coming. And as we talked about our last area of intervention after ground rules, the 5 tips for serve and return, play with people. Now we're on to play with toys and to be able to start building that coordinated joint attention between the object and the person and the object. With play with toys, the adult really needs to learn how to follow the child's lead, and the practitioner is going to coach the caregiver to follow the child's lead by helping them tune in specifically, so that really it's that part of that get face-to-face learning, really helping the parent tune in to what that child is interested in without judgment. Tune in. Avoid making suggestions. As adults, we have lots of ideas about how kids should act on things, play with things, explore things. So part of what we want to do here is avoid making suggestions about how the child does it. We want to tune in, we want to avoid the suggestions, and we want to interact. We want to get ourselves in there without being like, look at me, watch me. I can do it this way, right? I can start the top this way. You know, those kinds of things. What we want to do is tune into what the child is doing, provide wait time to see if the child sends us a cue or something that we could interpret as a cue. It might be a brief look. It might be a sound the child makes. It might be the child turning and moving to something else, but we want to make sure that we're tuned in. We're providing wait time for the child. We're showing that we're engaged, right? And we're there and we're following their lead. We're adding that language, and we acknowledge and we respond to any kind of cue that comes in that might be a serve, right? And then we give the return, and we come back to the toy and what they're doing with the toy or the object, right? We're really trying to help that child coordinate between those two. So anything that we can do to show that we see what they're interested in, we can make ourselves part of it by getting face-to-face, being down with them, and then giving them the opportunity and acknowledge and respond. One of the things that is really kind of a more, I'd say like a more intensive intervention, but is still applicable in the home setting, is a way of kind of making yourself fun. What we're trying to do in the make yourself fun to play with objects, so it goes beyond just tuning into what the child is naturally interested in, following the child's lead, kind of adding yourself into that interaction, like we talked about with follow your lead, right? The making yourself fun takes it to a different level, where we might be bringing in something that the child would really like to play with. Something that we know based on the child's sensory preferences, their interests and all of that, that this child is really going to be interested in. And we're going to show it with enthusiasm, and we're going to hold on to it. And we're going to show it. They can maybe touch it, but we don't give it to them. We keep it as part of us, and we put it away. We bring out something else that they're really interested in. And what we're trying to do is build that back and forth between the child. We're holding it by our face, right? And we're getting that child to look at the object, and then they're looking at us because it's here, and we're commenting, we're talking, we're moving, we're sharing back and forth. And then we're giving them something else once that attention might wane, right? and bringing it out. I wanted to, let's see, we have a couple minutes. I just want to introduce something to you that shows you this way of intervening that we can talk to parents about and help them be able to do in a way that is family-centered and follows their families, the materials they have in the home, etc. This is called, I'm just going to show you for a moment. So what happens in this is that I love her. She's called Salt by the Sea. You'll get her link. She's a speech language pathologist, and she shows really great ways. But she's more of a direct interventionist. So I think of these and I'm thinking, how can I help a family be able to do this in a really like fun, natural way? So what are some ways? Essentially the bucket intervention that you were just going to see is this. She brings in this play bucket with a lid on it. So it's a closed up big container. You can't see what's inside. It has a lid. And each time she pulls out something, puts the top back on the lid and shows the child the thing. And the child comes for it, is really interested in it, tries to get it. The child can touch it, but she continues to talk about it, to talk with the child, bring it to the eyesight, that kind of thing. And then she puts it back in. And then she gets another thing out. So it's this container with a lid on that has high engagement materials inside. What are some ways that you can introduce the bucket game in maybe a manner that is culturally responsive, that's family-centered, that uses the materials in a child's home? Is there a way that you could think of, thinking of families that you work with, instead of bringing a bucket in? Are there some things that you think of that you've seen that you could use? Socks in a laundry basket. Yeah, things in, out, and in. Making a song. Songs are always wonderful for attention, right? So you make a song as you're doing something in and out. A pillowcase, bath toys in a bowl. Absolutely, cover it up. Hide items behind your back. That is the natural way, right, of hiding something. Shoebox, boxes. Oh, a big Bojangles bag. That made me hungry. I was thinking of food. There's always a box hanging around, right? So, and use household items, because a lot of times children are curious about household items, right? And maybe some that we don't always want them to use. So if we're controlling it, they can be interested in touching it, and we can kind of moderate that way, bring it back out. So again, ways of encouraging that sustained and coordinated engagement over the same thing, so that we're building up that child's capacity to engage in deeper and more meaningful joint engagement, and furthering their ability to jointly attend to the environment around them, bring others into their environment by learning to initiate joint attention with gestures and vocalizations and words and other ways as they grow and develop, so they can be more successful communicators in their culture and in their family and in their worlds. So again, thank you all for coming today and spending this time over a topic that it's near and dear to my heart. These are resources. We will post these resources with the video. And I mentioned the word blog. We are redesigning and launching a blog, a VEIPD blog that's really focused on strategies and all the things that you guys might need. So be on the lookout for that. I think some of the things you guys talked about in here could be a great blog coming up for us. Don't forget, Talks on Tuesdays are now back for the fall season after our summer break. So October session is going to be coming up. This is another language kind of communication based. It's part 2 of the Gestalt, I don't know if I said that right, language workshop or seminar that we did. I think it was back in November of last year. So that is coming out soon. And check your inbox. Please take the survey and download the certificate. And if you have any questions, you guys know how to find me. I believe Pisha Ali at vcu.edu. All right, hope to see you all soon.